Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to tonight's session, which is going to be about reincarnation and past life experience, which I'm not going to delve that deeply into because this is one of our shorter sessions. But I thought what I would talk about was my experiences of them. And then I wanted to take us into not a meditation as such, but more of, well, I guess like a small short meditation, not one of the deeper, longer ones, but a short one, and just see if we have any messages rising up from perhaps past life experiences that want to make themselves known right now. And I'll pull a card on it on the perhaps the collective message as well. So my experience of reincarnation is that I find it one of the most fascinating things. I remember being in my dad's kitchen back when I was very young and him trying to explain to me what reincarnation was and feeling really mind boggled, actually, trying to get my head around the fact that perhaps I wasn't always me and I would have been somebody else. And that, I think, was a quite an overwhelming feeling, actually. You know, like it's like when you try and think of the universe, you try and conceptualize the universe and you just can't, and it feels almost quite frightening. So I think my initial thoughts on that were, obviously as a child, feeling quite overwhelmed by the idea of reincarnation. But as I've got older, I find it to be a really comforting concept, as well as anything else. And I also don't think it's a hard and fast thing either. I'm quite open to the idea that reincarnation is potentially one soul that reincarnates into different bodies, into different lifetimes. I also think maybe reincarnation is that some collective experience that we're diving into. And perhaps when we contact those past lives, maybe we're just contacting a life that somebody lived, part of the collective of spirits that have ever lived, that holds a message for us, potentially. It may be that within our infinite spiritual consciousness, we can access everything and anything, which is interesting in and of itself. It's all a little bit magical. When I started writing The High Heel Guide to Enlightenment, which was my first book, I did undertake some life between life and past life regression, which was difficult. And the people who I've spoken to who've undertaken that as well, I think what's difficult about it, and they agreed with me, my dad and his wife did one recently, and they were saying that you actually feel kind of like you're making it up. So maybe people go into a hypnotic state that is like really deep and that they don't know what they're saying, but I was like hyper aware of what I was saying during my each one that I've done. However, there was weird evidences that came out of each one that was unexpected and outside of that sort of self-consciousness. I don't know if anyone's ever been hypnotized for, I don't know, stop smoking, stop drinking, for a phobia or something like that, but you do kind of feel there's a part of you that is quite aware and conscious of what the person is saying. And there's another part of you perhaps that is where you're trying to get to. But I did have the one hypnotherapy, past life regression that I always find really interesting now, where I'd been a nun in a past life and it felt like I was in France or somewhere. And I was really sick to death of children because I worked in an orphanage, and it all felt very, very worky, very work orientated, very exhausting, very like thankless task, real menial kind of hard existence. And it was at that point in time, I had not wanted children really before that point, because I'd always seen children for no real reason. I liked children, but I'd always seen them as being this hard, menial, painful task. And actually I have no evidence from this life that would make me think that all the children I'd been around had been delightful, and I quite liked playing with my little cousins and things like that. And it was after that after having that past life regression and kind of accessing that life as a nun, that I then became quite broody, and not long after had my first daughter. So I think there's something to be said for that. The other amazing thing that happened with that was I'd done this hypnosis. It was in a yoga studio. There was a lot of noise. There was people coming and going in the background, coming in and out of yoga classes. So I was very distracted, and I just felt like I hadn't allowed myself to go deep enough. And I was in Tesco's, of all places, the next morning. It was a really early morning, and I was going up and down the aisles on my way to work, I guess. And all of a sudden, this nun in a grey habit, which was the same colour I'd seen myself in. And I've never, normally I've only ever seen nuns with the black and white, but this one was grey. And she just came with her trolley, toddling past me with like a big cartload of flour, and like obviously for the nunnery. And that was like, oh, okay. And I'd never seen a nun there before or since, and I don't think I've ever seen a nun since then, apart from maybe on telly. So yeah, that felt like another weird kind of affirmation. So I think past life experiences are definitely empowering, interesting, intriguing. And I don't know if you guys, but some people sometimes feel like they maybe had a past life experience, or feel like they are connected to a certain era or a certain time or a certain historical figure. I certainly didn't, but it is really interesting how I had that kind of completely against having children, feeling that they were this menial hard work, to experiencing that life and then recognizing that perhaps that wasn't me, that was something else. And then everything changing. And I've had life between life regressions, because I think some of you may have read the Michael Newton books that I've recommended. We did do one in a little book club here previously, where he stumbled through his psychiatric and hypnotherapeutic work. He stumbled into a space which is a life between lives, almost like the spiritual world, the holding place where we go before, or not necessarily before we reincarnate. It's home. It's like a home. And then we go there and we just discuss the lives we've lived and make plans for future ones and what we need to learn. And fascinating books. And I've had life between life regressions, although honestly I struggle to recall much about those right now. There was one past life regression I did do where I did go completely into character, which was a bit weird. And I was an Indian head of a family in India, and I was terribly sexist to my own daughters and the stuff I was coming out with. And it was weird because I was saying these things, but the conscious part of me was laughing at myself. So I was like laughing while saying these horribly sexist things about my own daughters, because like my conscious mind was just like, what is going on? And I'm like, have I gone into character? Because it feels like you're putting on a character, but at the same time, it feels very real. So I don't know. So I guess that's just to give you a taste of kind of past life regression and life between lives. And I think we can glean a lot. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting books out there. I think the ones that are most interesting are potentially the ones that involve children, where children have remembered their past lives and reported them back to parents, and then the parents have looked it up, or they've taken them to an expert and they've really looked into it, and what the stories that they're telling appear to be completely true, factual, related to actual people who existed or circumstances. So if anybody wants to read up about reincarnation, I would start with those books. And there is a very famous author, it's a woman, and I can't remember what she's called, I'm afraid. There's Brian Weiss, Weiss. He writes books about reincarnation, but there was also a woman, and her name just escapes me, but she wrote a couple of books, I think, about children's reincarnation stories.
Interesting that your two that you remember do have a child connection.
And yes, I hadn't actually thought of that. And that father he wasn't wicked, he wasn't evil, he was just a man of his time, and he was quite set in his ways. And I remember he wanted to slaughter a goat for his daughter's wedding, which was a real big thing, but it was purely for how it would look, how it would be perceived to the people. And that I kind of saw him on his deathbed, and his daughter was there comforting him, and he felt terrible, like like finally recognizing that she was a real human being, you know. So I guess, yeah, both of my past life experiences that I've recalled, and I'm sure there's many, many more, were both kind of detached child carers, which I'm very the opposite now. So perhaps they have helped with that. So that's my little bit on reincarnation, really. And I think it's for you guys to go away, to research, and to think about, you know, whether you are interested in what your past life was, or whether you're just interested in the phenomenon itself, because it's just really fascinating. And there's a lot of information out there about it. I mean, I don't know, talk to friends, family. Most people, I guess, might not have these experiences. I know I've had my daughter, Clover, has said to me, when she was little, she had a little phase of saying things along the lines of, when I was your mummy, I used to do this. And she'll say little things like that. And she also future projected once, like, when I'm your mom, I'm going to do this, which I do think there is that aspect of, it's not a linear line of time. And actually you can go forward in future life progression. I haven't read enough about that to really be able to talk about it. But I think that Michael Newton does, or when he was alive, did do that and wrote about it. So projecting lives into the future, including into some insanely advanced societies. So it all remains to be seen, I guess, but quite interesting. Oh, and he he has taken people to lives on other planets, lives as other beings, animals, I guess, alien beings. So it's not just that we could incarnate as humans. There's perhaps the potential. I think he did one. I read one where this woman had been a rock or had been part of the earth, which I think, well, why wouldn't we be? We are elementally made up of everything that is upon the earth. Why wouldn't we, if not live within that as a soul, but carry that memory within our DNA, within our being, and that memory come up through hypnosis? It's really interesting. But I think reading about it was a while since I read that, but there was stuff there about how the lessons she learned as a rock, like you can imagine, patience, slowness, stillness, observation, really fascinating. And I guess no desire to do anything other than to be as she was. So it makes me think that perhaps we're all just like little motes of spirit swirling around, and we get to experience lots and lots of different things, none being better or worse than any, perhaps more learning in a human life. But who knows? Maybe there's more of us being a rock or a blade of grass. I'm not sure. We'll see. But yeah, really, really fascinating stuff that I would definitely recommend you all go have a little research of. Don't see a lot about these at the minute. I think a lot of the books that were written on it are a bit older, but hopefully there'll be a bit of a resurgence of intrigue into those subjects. Okay, so what I wanted to do next was just take us into a little meditation, and just with the idea to connect with a word or an experience, or just something to float to the surface that is perhaps based upon a previous life, a reincarnation, or an experience from the wider consciousness that feels like it needs to be with us right now. Okay, and I do apologize if you can hear my children. They're being incredibly loud in a laughy / screamy way upstairs. Okay, so if we close our eyes and we'll take a lovely deep breath. So just bringing yourself into this moment, into where we are right now, this body, this name, this person that you happen to be inhabiting, this truth of you. And I want you to imagine that there's a tunnel opening up. And you might feel yourself flying down a tunnel, walking down a tunnel. Taking a few more deep breaths as you relax and become familiar with the tunnel, noticing what it looks like, what color it is, because it can be any color. You might be a nice dark tunnel. It feels safe. It might feel like a tunnel that's kind of underground with roots and mud and, you know, kind of earthy. It might be a more angelic tunnel, crystalline perhaps. But just moving down this tunnel, taking another deep breath. So we're not going into a full past life regression or anything like that. But we're just going to make space for something to bubble up to the surface. So as you're moving down a tunnel, imagine yourself just being pulled, being called perhaps to a particular life, a particular moment, a particular lesson or learning, and feeling yourself very, very safe, very, very peaceful and content within this skin, but allowing your consciousness to just expand a little to a life that held great meaning, an experience within that life that held great meaning, something that perhaps is a lesson that you're learning at this moment in this life, or something that could really help you within this life. So imagining yourself rolling, flying, walking down a tunnel, taking another deep breath and relaxing. Being called to a point in the tunnel that feels like home, feels familiar, feels safe. Trusting that whatever lesson or word or image that you receive right now will be perfect, protected, and full of wisdom for you. So just allowing your body almost to feel pulled down a tunnel until such point that it comes to a standstill. Breathing in the energy, the light, the healing vibrations that exist within this spiritual space. And as you breathe them in, you allow some of the day to just drop away. So you're making space for a memory, a word, a lesson, a learning, something inspirational, an affirmation to just bubble up to the surface. So taking a nice deep breath and just being peaceful for a moment and seeing what comes up for you. Taking your word, your offering, your experience, your memory, whatever it is, and just holding it close, committing to remembering and recalling it. And it doesn't need to come with any particular context about the life, unless it does, in which case hold on to that too. And then begin to feel almost that you're being pulled back up the tunnel, back the way you came in, back into your body, back into this daily life. Quite speedily returning to yourself with this new sliced piece of information. Whizzing back in until you feel like you're more fully formed within your body, within who you are now. Bringing this wisdom with you taking a nice deep breath to really cement yourself back into your body. And then wiggling fingers and toes, feeling your body on the seat or the bed or the space beneath you. And whenever you're ready, taking a deep breath again and stretching, yawning, feet on the ground, returning to the here and now. So I hope everybody found a word. My word was fluid and formation and flowing, which it feels like I'm really attempting to do in my life right now. So instead of sort of feeling into the uncertainty of everything, feeling into the freedom of the flow and trusting that it always works out in the right way, because it always does. So actually that word was very appropriate for me, and I have no insight into where that came from or what life it might be, or maybe it's what I'm learning now. Did anybody want to share anything from their experience?
I got the word truth, but I don't know what it relates to particularly.
I guess it seems to me that the longer I'm on a spiritual path, the truth seems to be the all and end all. Like if we can't exist within our fullest truth, then we have to keep trying. and that changes, doesn't it, from day to day. And when we think, even when we think we are in our fullest truth, there's still some stuff needs scrubbing off and changing and releasing.
Yeah, I had a little discussion with myself saying you just made that up.
No.
And then my hands went really hot and the top of my head went really hot. So I thought, oh, maybe I didn't.
No, you definitely didn't make that up. I think that yeah, I mean, like I thought I made up all mine, although maybe just ask for an affirmation for it. So just kind of devote your attentions to anything that comes along, like a sign or a symbol, like my nun in Tesco's, which was gobsmacking. But maybe you'll come across the word truth or overhear it, or I don't want to put ideas in how that might come. But I think even if you made it up, where did it come from? From your consciousness. And that's a powerful place. So I'd say it was something worth making up. And if and that's one of the things I say about a spiritual path, is that sometimes it does feel a little bit like fantasy or storytelling or making up, but all creativity, where does it come from? Like songs that appear in heads, or books that appear in minds, or images that artists put to paper that they have envisioned from somewhere. They could just say, oh, I'm just making all of this up, but sometimes it's too meaningful. Whenever we feel like we're making something up, we actually need to give ourselves permission to think, well, maybe that's my divinity stepping forward, and we're making it up because that's what culture would have us believe, but actually it's just connection with truth and self. That's what I think. So I'll pull us a card. I don't know if Kate, did you want to share? If you do, you can pop it in the chat or not. No pressure whatsoever. But I have the gorgeous Rebel Heart cards. I don't know if you guys are aware, there's also a Rebel Heart Tarot Talk over on YouTube. So we're doing lots of interviews over there with people who appeared in the cards. So I'd love you, if you haven't already, to go subscribe. There's already quite a bit of content, including Monday readings using this deck. My children are now roaring as if they are in like one of those metal bands. It's my eldest, she does that. I think she will grow up to be in a metal band. Okay, so for our exploration, I'm going to just take a card that is based on what we've been talking about tonight, past life and reincarnation. I have no idea how this is going to work or what the card might be, so let's have a look. 10 of Wands. So we have this wonderful birdie character who's completely overwhelmed and wrapped up. This is Clover. Last year, she came down, she had a witch's dress on, but she came down wrapped in toilet roll as a mummy. and I took a photo of it and it ended up in the cards, it would be very unnoticeable. I think it's the kind of thing on a card that you could have this card for years and years and years, and then suddenly go, oh my God, what's that? And realize it's a child. But yeah, I think the 10 of Wands is perhaps we have so much clutter in our lives, don't we? And in our minds and in our hearts. And actually, if we're so overwhelmed, how can we possibly access the infinite? Whether that's a past life lesson or something else. So perhaps the guidance here is to try to calm the crazy, to put down some of the tasks, to make the space that is necessary to connect to these things. So this being here right now is that kind of space, you know, or just taking a few moments a day just to breathe. And you not necessarily like to connect to a past life, but to connect to the divine within so that we can trust it and follow it wherever it takes us. But I think this is just also perhaps suggesting that life is really, really busy and crazy. And maybe that's why we're so in it. And maybe we have to be really, really in it sometimes, because the point of our past lives isn't not as relevant as where we are right now. And being fully immersed in all that comes is quite important too. So it's interesting. So there we go. All right, ladies. Before we finish, any questions on that particular topic? No?
For me, I have got that book from that guy. What's the American guy?
Michael Newton.
Yeah, I got about just under halfway through it and was struggling a bit with it, to be honest. Found it a little bit repetitive in places. So
maybe
it's his style of writing. Yeah. Okay.
Brian Weiss is more storytelling.
Yeah.
So it's more reincarnation than it is life between lives. So he'll tell the stories that people have shared. And that woman, I feel like saying it's Dolores Cannon, but I don't think it is. But she has written some really interesting books. But it might be her. It might be Diana Cooper. No, she does the Angels book. I'll try and figure out who it is. But the ones that are stories of other people's reincarnations and then the evidence that people have found, they're the ones that are also really, really interesting and perhaps not as heavy and repetitive as the Michael Newton one. I have to say, we are scheduled to do next Wednesday and the Wednesday after. Something has come up. I'm going to America. I'm going to America on Sunday. Yeah, my granny's not been very well. And like Clover's never met her. Ivy's only met her once when she was like 1 year old. And so she's got heart failure, which people can have and go on with. But she's had a fall, she's broke her ribs, she's ended up in hospital and then in like a sort of care home type thing. And she's just not doing that well. She's 96 and she's just like literally been like as busy as a teenager her entire life up until the last few months. And I just thought I can't keep not going. You know, there's been lots of reasons not to go, COVID and young children and husbands having heart attacks and all this kind of nonsense. But I thought now is the time to go. So we are going. So that will be, I think, 2 Wednesdays that I will miss. So what I'm going to do is record a couple of meditations and put them out on the Wednesdays. So I hope that's okay with everybody.
So if you have to, so because you need
Well,
to
I will
spend
do
some
my
time
best.
with that. Yeah.
I've got tomorrow and the tomorrow and Friday that I'm going to attempt to do that. I'll just do little mini ones because the site is still being quite awkward in what it's allowing me to post. And I might put them on YouTube and just send a link. Oh, I have a child here with me and she's angry at me because I have a candle lit. She hates candles. She's terrified of them. She blew it out.
That might be a past life thing.
It could well be, couldn't it? Well be, but she gets with me and really look and then comes and blows out all candles very carefully, bless her. You want to come say hi to everyone? And I'm about to say bye. This is Lisa and this is Kate.
Bye.
There's Kate, but she just got a screen off. Okay. All right then. So I'm gonna. Oh, there she is.
Yay.
Clover. I'm not sure if you met her before. We need to go put you in the bath, lady. Okay. And she's hungry. All right then. Thank you. And I'll get some meditation. I'll get at least one meditation up on there. But I think I'll try and do one for each Wednesday. So, and then when we come back, when I'm back, we'll have our big proper hour-long session, which should be around Halloween as well. So perfect. All right, then. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Bye.
Bye.